film podcast where everybody's entitled to be wrong. My name is Isaac Leggett. I'm one of your hosts.
And my name's Chris Demoulas, and I'm also one of the hosts of this show.
Nice.
Nailed it. So I guess because this is the first episode, we should probably go into our backgrounds. I am an aspiring screenwriter and independent filmmaker. I'd say that's probably the best way to describe myself. Currently unemployed in the COVID-ridden Los Angeles.
Sure.
I guess.
I'm unemployed in the similarly COVID-ridden East Coast, Pennsylvania. So, that's the life. But yes, we're both filmmakers.
It's just life right now. Yeah. We met in college.
Yep.
We both went to Fairleigh Dickinson University for undergrad. And
North Jersey.
And I was, what was I? I was in a play called, we both were in a play called Two Gentlemen of Verona. I played the Duke of Milan. You played mandolin.
I was, the understudy to the mandolin player for a night.
Yes. And it was a great performance. It was. I believed you as the understudy to the mandolin player.
Can I tell you a secret?
Yes.
I never fully learned the chords and did not know the tempo, and I played everything half speed, and I only got halfway through the song, and it was over. And I don't think anyone knew the difference.
I was in the play. I heard it rehearsed. I didn't know the difference. I might have even been in that scene. Who knows? I don't know. I don't remember. But anyways, while I was in this play, I was also developing, at the time, my senior thesis film that I was working on to shoot in a few months. And
which was
I didn't
a feature because he's a madman.
Because I'm a madman.
Yeah.
And because I had the resources to do it, so I was like, hey, why not? But I kind of didn't really know that many people who were very experienced in sound, and I don't even know who told me to reach out to you. It might have been my professor in senior thesis, but I don't think so. I think it was someone who was actually in the class told me to reach out to you and ask if you would be willing to help the sound mix and work on my film.
Well, the benefit to film school, and if anybody's ever listening to this and you're an aspiring filmmaker planning on going to film school, is that no one learns how to be a sound guy. So if you learn how to be a sound guy, you're going to find people who want to work with you really quickly.
Yep.
And I was fortunate enough my freshman year that the only sound guy at our school who was a senior took me under his wing and kind of showed me the ropes. So by the time he graduated, I was a sophomore, you were going into your senior year, and I was like the only guy to talk to, really.
Yep. And you were the guy I went to, and I don't think you were able to help me on the first weekend that we were shooting, because we were shooting soon. We shot some of it in December, and then we shot like 16 days in a row in January.
Yeah, the bulk of it.
Yeah, but we had a weekend shoot before that you were not able to be a part of, and you were sorely missed. But that's how we met, and I feel like one night we were staying, all the crew, which was not a large crew.
There was five of
maybe
us.
Yeah.
There was five of us. It was five people shot a feature film in a month.
There was
it
sometimes
was at least
10.
one of those things. No, we never had a crew bigger than 7. There was a couple big days where we brought in 2 extra guys. I've done the math. There were 7 people, and you didn't have an AD to start. Sorry. We're already getting off track.
No, that's... Hey, listen, it was trial. I keep bumping into this desk. I was trial by fire, and
hell yeah.
And it was amazing, and we were able to pull
least,
off.
Yeah. By the end of that year,
movie.
we were like, okay, at least I guess I know how to do that now. Yeah.
But that was how we met. And one night while staying at that production house, I think we just had a really long conversation that lasted till like 1:00 in the morning. It was like one of those like 3-hour conversations. And then
I mean, I think that filmmaking it creates a certain type of bond between people. In like this sense that it is both a very personal, creative effort, but it's also so much hard work that it becomes this thing that like if 2 people are able to successfully do that together, you really get to know both sides of somebody really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And some of the most lasting and profound friendships I've ever had in my life were just because I ended up making a movie with somebody for 2 to 6 weeks. and and we've been very, very close friends for the 10 years since then.
Yep. But
But
yeah,
so
that's
yeah, I think that those bonds are formed in a really fun way, and obviously a thing that comes out of that is how much shit we talk about every movie we've ever seen.
yep.
Yeah.
Yep. No, it's kind of the main source of our friendship is our love of film, I feel like, and because we relate a lot on storytelling and how we sort of work together in that sense, or not work together, but like how we both develop stories together.
Yeah, and we both love fun genre shit. So kind of if somebody is throwing out an idea for something that's like a little bonkers, like there's always a yes and to it, I think is like a healthy thing with kind of the way that we've always worked together. But also on top of that, more often than not, we find ourselves really, really disagreeing
Yeah.
on the shit we like.
It feels like the one subject, though. I don't know. It's unique. A disagreement in film, or in just probably love of art in any sense, it's unique in the sense that I can really dislike something that you enjoy, but I can fully understand usually your enjoyment for it, and it's sort of like one of those things where I can respect that we completely and totally disagree. And I guess there aren't many subjects that people have conversations where they're really adamantly disagreeing about something, but they're retaining respect for one another. And I feel like film is one of those lovely subjects that you can have that if you're not a terrible person.
Well, I mean, anybody, including myself, can totally be an asshole. But I also think that there's something that, since we know so much about how the sausage is made, that kind of like, I'm of the opinion that if I don't like a movie, unless I think a movie is like really like poorly intended or like really toxic or shitty in a certain way, like usually if I don't like a movie, I hope there is somebody who likes it, because the idea of a movie existing that absolutely nobody likes and it's like actually for no one, like that, like almost breaks my heart in a weird way.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure every movie can be for someone.
I think so. I think maybe there are some that are just truly stinkers, but on those we won't.
Sure, there's exceptions to the rule,
But those we will not discuss on this show, because we're just going to be discussing the movies that you and I disagree on, and can still kind of retain our friendship despite that.
Right. And the idea, I guess, is that, roundabout way of saying that, each week we're going to be finding movies that we have a pretty steep divide on, and really kind of let each opinion, especially if it's a film that kind of has a consensus or a notably unpopular opinion or kind of a hot take, like letting those conversations exist in a way, kind of seeing both sides of a film. And usually, and we will mostly be talking about the content and, the implications and the creation of, that movie, like, and the context of all the other people around it.
Yes, so that's kind of what we're going to be discussing. And just to kind of make a note on what Isaac said earlier, I mean, we know how the sausage is made, but we also know how the sausage is made on very sort of like independent, I guess, lower scale than sort of like, we're not really like, we've made, maybe this is a weird thing to incorporate. We've made low budget films before, but I don't think I've ever worked on a set on a production that was larger than maybe like $10 million was the largest production I ever worked on.
No, me neither. And, right. And I have a true fascination, I think we both do, in like the studio system and the films that come out of the studio system, even though maybe for lack of opportunity or whatever, but we also, I think the stories that we like to tell often aren't of that vibe. We like and live in the indie film scene because it's the thing we're passionate about, but
absolutely.
But I am fascinated by the studio system. It is a very, very weird thing. And, the first film we're talking about today is an indie film, but it's from like, it's being distributed by kind of a big up and coming big deal studio. So like that type of name recognition, all the brand it's very fascinating.
Yes. So I guess with that, we'll get right into our first episode that we're going to be discussing this week is The Lighthouse. The Lighthouse, which
Sorry, I cut you off, and I shouldn't seem excited about it yet.
no, you're allowed to be. Okay, well, we'll get up right up front about it. Isaac is excited about this film. I am.
Yeah.
I am not excited about this film. But before we get into our feelings about this film, we're just gonna go over some quick little boring stats. It came out May 19th, 2019, at the Cannes Film Festival. And then October 18th, 2019, was the United States release date. It's the studio's A24. It's directed by Robert Eggers, who is the mastermind behind The Vavitch, or The Witch, as it's commonly known. Screenplay is by Robert Eggers, and this time his brother, Max Eggers. It's inspired by an Edgar Allan Poe short story, right, called The Lighthouse?
Yeah, I think they kind of described it that it was just they had initially sought to kind of make an adaptation of it. And then over the years, the story that they ended up developing was, very kind of its own thing and not really based on it in any way. But it certainly was kind of, that's where the idea grew out of.
It definitely seems, like inspired is the correct way to describe it. Because, I sort of, when I Wikipedia just this movie, full disclosure, I definitely saw that statistic as well, and thought that was an interesting little tidbit to know, because I definitely didn't know that the first time I watched it.
It makes sense, though.
Yeah. So for me, I watched this for the first time in theaters. Actually, yeah, I went to theaters when it was released in 2019 to watch it, and I watched it again for this episode on the small screen. And I looked it up on Wikipedia to. What was your first viewing experience, just out of curiosity?
Also saw it in theaters. I had couple friends of mine had all been really, really excited to see it. And, with where I live, if you want to get like a good art house movie, you kind of got to drive for like half hour, 45 minutes, which is like fine. But, and so like we made our way down to a theater that had it, and, there wasn't a whole lot of people in the theater, but, there was more than I expected, which made me really, really happy. And it was a really, I was immediately enamored by it. Like, it was a wonderful, wonderful viewing experience for me. And then I've seen it once more before this, and then I watched it again like 2 nights ago.
Cool. So if you do not know, do you want to, I guess, let people know the synopsis of this bad boy?
Yeah.
The quick just sort of breakdown, and then we'll get right into how we feel a little more deeply.
The Lighthouse stars Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe, and features Valeria Carmen and Logan Hawkes in small, basically unspeaking roles. It's really just a two-hander.
Right.
And, it's basically about 2 late 19th century lighthouse keepers. One is a seasoned wickie, as they call themselves, and the other one is like a young novice. And they're working a 4-week stint on like a remote New England island, and over the time, isolation and seagulls and maybe even mermaids or krakens plague the young, mysterious, quote-unquote, Ephraim, as he calls himself, while old Tom kind of keeps this weird private control over like the great lamp of the lighthouse. But then kind of just as they start to develop their bond together, a raging storm maroons them on the island for like a lot longer than they were supposed to be there. And they just push each other deeper and deeper into like absolute madness. And it's a very Lovecraftian and kind of like New England folktale vibe. In the terms of, if we're talking about, the sides, the take that each one of us is going to have on this movie, I love this movie.
Yes. There's a lot of
this was my number one film of 2019. I just love this movie.
Yes. No, there's a lot there's a lot to love. There's definitely a lot of silent movie, I'm like, my mind is blanking. There's just a lot of silent era film inspiration in a lot of the images, especially the opening shots. I am the person didn't enjoy this as much, but there's a lot to love in this movie. I love the opening shots of the film. It definitely gives me a silent era, Tim Burton-y kind of vibe. Like, it seemed like they shot a couple of miniatures. I think the island, it almost looked like was a miniature the way they were shooting it in the fog, and like the boat is approaching it at the very, very beginning. The beginning of this movie is really strong for me. What is it? Jarin. I hope it's Jarin. Jarin Blaschke's cinematography is fucking phenomenal. It's definitely the thing that deserved the Oscar nomination, in my opinion. But I also think Mark Corvin's score is really incredible. I think it's
also very minimal. Like it's not there for a lot of the movie. There's like so many extended sequences of just no music.
Yeah,
and I think that you're right that like it's so effective, and then you're like, oh wait, but it's also in it so much less than I would actually think that it is.
Yeah, it's not in it much, but it is very simple in the sound that even when it is there, it's not doing much, but it's doing a lot in terms of like making me feel dread and just kind of like in this sort of like murky world that is being established. The directing, the film, this is where it gets interesting for me, because I think the film is well directed. But in the case of this movie, I actually kind of think that's sort of to the movie's detriment, almost in a way. I sort of wrote this down in my notes just because I thought it popped in my head when I was watching this movie again. This Sam Raimi quote that I kind of paraphrased because it was difficult to even find the video with the quote. But he basically just says the worst crime that a filmmaker can commit is to make a boring picture. And there's literally a quote in The Lighthouse where the Willem Dafoe character, Thomas, I'll just say Thomas for both of them because they're both Thomas. So Thomas has this quote in the movie where he says, "Boredom makes men into madmen." And I feel like this movie was almost made so the audience could exist in that boredom that Robert Pattinson's character is experiencing and the monotonous sort of like repetitive nature. You know, Robert Pattinson has to perform sort of these feats of manual labor, followed by scenes of Dafoe being an asshole to him during the day, followed by scenes of Willem Dafoe, sometimes connecting with him when they're really, really drunk. But like that repetitiveness, I found boring as a viewer. Like I found it disengaging. But that's really it's really almost in the dialogue scenes where, you know, they're talking about, like I'm trying to think of like an example of just like for example, just Robert Pattinson's story, the way it comes up felt very contrived to me. Like it felt like there's literally like lines of dialogue that he has where he's almost like blaming Willem Dafoe for like trying to pull some sort of emotional catharsis moment out of Robert Pattinson. He's like sort of like, stop this, I know what you're trying to do, it's like you're trying to make me say this thing. But I never felt like he was in that moment. And I just feel like the backstory of his character,
because I think that was maybe the point. But you know,
interesting. What do you mean by that though?
Well, I think that it's showing that Dafoe doesn't have to, old Tom doesn't have to coax it out of him. He wants to get it off his chest. And so even though old Tom isn't trying, he's blaming old Tom for pulling it out of him, but it's actually that it's coming out of him.
Okay. That's interesting.
That he's been like repressing that. And so he's kind of blaming, okay, fine, I'll tell you. But it's like, you know, in his gut, he wants to, you know.
Yeah. Somehow I found that, it's weird, somehow I found that moment contrived. I found that like a very just like, it felt contrived to me in that moment. But
yeah, and I guess if it doesn't land, it doesn't land.
But but that's just for me personally. But there's a lot to like love in, it's weird because like I'm saying the dialogue scenes is where I think the movie drags, and I think maybe it's more the physical labor where it drags, but I don't mind that stuff as much. It's just the dialogue I really only enjoy when it's Willem Dafoe almost like my favorite scene in the movie is when he goes, "Hark!" and he throws down this curse at Pattinson. And to me, I interpreted really the sort of like Proteus-likeness of this character, who's sort of like the old man of the sea that is kind of like the man on the land for Neptune in ancient Greek myths. And
right, yeah.
I really loved every line of dialogue and every moment Willem Dafoe is... Every moment he's sort of like doing that performance, which is either, to me, it's either he's gaslighting the shit out of Robert Pattinson's character, or he actually is this Proteus, old man of the sea, who is this messenger for Neptune. It's one or the other. Like, to me, it's like Pattinson's crazy, and this guy is also gaslighting the shit out of him with everything he's saying to him, or he's actually this sort of like mythic character. And whenever those scenes come up, I loved it, but I was always drawn out of it by Pattinson's performance. And I think it's also just the way in which his character is written, because he just really feels out of time to me in this movie, in his manner of speech, in his dialogue itself. He sounds like a character. He sounds like a person from the 1920s. And that wouldn't bother me if Willem Dafoe's performance and his character didn't feel so steeped in like an older kind of like nautical jargon that wasn't always fully understandable sometimes. And I even watched it a second time with subtitles. I still don't even know if I fully understood everything he was saying as a character, but I was completely enamored with every moment he was on screen. Like, I couldn't take my eyes away from him in every moment. And for some reason, Pattinson's character, just every time he was on screen, I like cared like less and less for the film. I really just couldn't get into his performance in this movie for some reason. And I don't know if it's the script. I don't know if it's just sort of the vagueness of the natural vagueness of kind of this experimental fantasy story that maybe he didn't quite know where to go with it. I'm making an assumption about a performance. I still think they're both brilliant performances, but I really engaged with Willem Dafoe's actively, and I don't know if I did as much with Pattinson.
So let's talk about Pattinson. What is your relationship with Robert Pattinson as an actor?
So I know of him as the male vampire in the Twilight films.
Right, sure. Yeah,
I know him as Cedric Diggory in Goblet of Fire, and I love him in that. And it's been years since I've watched Goblet of Fire, but I remember really enjoying Goblet of Fire.
I think that's a thing that
Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Sorry,
I think that's like a low key really good performance.
Yeah.
And he's, even relative to like the source material, like, he only gets so much screen time because that movie kind of has to burn the whole time. But he really, I think, makes an impression for every moment that he's on screen. And it's kind of no wonder after that performance that he was the Twilight guy. You know what I mean? Like, after a performance like that, that seems like a really smart move. It just sucks that the source material is lacking, in my opinion.
And I guess the other performance that I can think of right now is Good Time, which I saw probably like 2 months ago, which is another thing. That's an example of, I think it's a really great performance, but I don't always engage with the context of the movie or the material that's happening in the film. But his performance in that is very engaging, even though I don't like his character at all in terms of like the fiction of the story.
Yeah, I mean, not to go too deep into that because I feel like there's a chance we're going to have a Good Time episode at some point. He's playing the straight up boogeyman in that movie. He is just every single person he comes into contact with, he is just ruining them. And also there's something too, and I imagine this is maybe a thing I should be giving more congratulations to the costuming and continuity departments, but there is something to the fact that legitimately every 10 to 15 minutes in that movie, his entire costume changes. And it's so cool.
I don't even know if I'm aware of that aspect of the film. That's interesting.
His costume changes at least every 15 minutes.
Okay.
It just because he is, every time he goes to like a new objective, he is like shedding a piece of piece of clothing, or like grabbing a jacket or putting it on, or like the blue paint blows up on them, so he has to take his jacket off, so now he looks different, and then he legitimately, and then there's once he changes into the guard uniform and stuff, like he's changing his clothes the whole movie. It's so cool. And I know that's
I didn't register or find that engaging in the slightest.
That's really funny.
But that's interesting. No, that's and then
It's a cool movie.
I guess the only other performance that I can think of recently that I remember him in is Tenet, which I did see him in Tenet in theaters, and although I don't like that movie, I don't think he's the problem, and his performance he's kind of fulfilling a role that the film really requires, and a lot rests on that role, and he executes it very, very well. Pattinson executes it very, very well. It's a very, I mean, talking about Christopher Nolan, they're very clinical films, so he's like this portion of a film who executed well.
Yeah, and I think that his performance and in Tenet, Elizabeth Debicki's performance, I think are like the things that kind of work on an emotional level. And I kind of almost forgot that he was in that, but then as soon as you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, he is like the thing I probably connected with the most in that movie.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I remember. Maybe it's silly to like give too much attention to like this reaction or this guff, but like I still remember when Robert Pattinson was announced as the new Batman.
That is big.
And like that movie looks like they're kind of out of new ideas still, and I guess that's okay, but like maybe that money could be spent on a character other than Batman. But I just remember the online vitriol of just like the guy from Twilight, and it's like, I don't know. When we were in college, and I don't know if I ever really like laid this on you in college, but like a friend of mine and I kind of always referenced what we called like our rule of 5 game, which is like if you're saying someone's a bad actor, like if I can name 5 movies that a person gives a truly good performance in, then like that clearly they're not a bad actor. Like sometimes, they might not have a performance that lands, or they might be in a product that doesn't work in a certain way. But like, I don't know, like, so you're saying you like Robert Pattinson in Tenet. You're saying you like him in Goblet of Fire, right? So that's 2.
And I like him in Good Time.
Good Time.
I like him in Good Time.
I think that his performance in The Lighthouse is absolutely magical. And even if you're not as clued in on it, that's okay.
But I think that it's very much like that is very much a performance that I would not say is a bad performance. It's disengaging for me personally, but I think
fair.
He is once again fulfilling a purpose in that movie, which is to elicit kind of this feeling of boredom, and I think he is sort of like doing that, and he is sort of, I believe, his struggles in the film and his emotional kind of like torment. But yeah, I found it disengaging for some reason. I didn't find it as engrossing, and it always was taking me out of the experience rather than Willem Dafoe, where like literally in the scene where he goes hark, I had goosebumps now twice, like once in theaters and once at home.
Yeah.
That scene gives me goosebumps. But not anything from Robert Pattinson in this movie. But that's just for me. Yeah. I think that the performance itself is arguably a good performance.
Well, I think I think that's fair. Arguably a good performance. Like certainly lands on the good level. And have you seen Lost City of Z?
I haven't seen Lost City of Z.
That movie, much like James Gray's follow-up Ad Astra, is a bit of a slog at points. But Robert Pattinson is like by far the best part of that movie.
Cool. Okay. I'll have to check that one out.
He's really good in it. He's like in the first half as like the major supporting character for the first half of the movie.
And to also
there's like a time jump. Yeah.
Yeah. And to also, just to be fair to Robert Pattinson, he's also not the problem with the Twilight films. And
no,
I can pick any of those films, maybe not any of them, but certainly, you know what? I don't know. I don't blame. If I think it's a bad performance in the Twilight movies, I basically don't think it's because of him. Because like I'm thinking back to like the scenes when he's like sitting in the classroom and the wind blows on Kristen Stewart, and like he gets a smell of her pheromones, and he makes
Oh my gosh.
a face that makes sense from the way he was directed, but it's just like, that's just a weird moment to kind of choose to express it in that way. Like it's such a that movie has no idea what human emotion is. That entire franchise has no idea what human emotion is.
Yeah, the source material on that is tough. I think there's been this weird kind of like recent bit of like a reclamation for Twilight, like in like the film internet world, and I find that ultimately to be silly because I think those are all like pretty fucking bad movies.
Yeah.
But I also, the number of actors who have come out of those movies that are like great actors, of our time, like Robert Pattinson, Kristen Stewart, Anna Kendrick, like, it's like some undeniable shit. So like, but yeah, those are not good movies. It's kind of insane that there's like, but I guess, certain people, if you grow up with it, you grow up with it.
Yeah. And I don't even think,
but,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that, I think with this movie, the dichotomy between Pattinson and Dafoe's performances, I would call that intentional, because I think that like in this time period of like the late 1800s where like, you're saying Pattinson sounds like he's from like the 1920s. And I think that he's like a modern city boy who's like, he's like clearly like from New England and has been like running around hiding and being a fuck up his whole life. And that, so like, he is like, I think like he is the future hiding out in, this isolated area. And Willem Dafoe is just this absolutely dated. So the gap between them, like one seems anachronistically new and one seems anachronistically old. You know what I mean? And I think that I would call that intentional.
I definitely,
the way that those characters are depicted and the way that they are bounced off of each other, that it's just like truly they're of a different era.
This is a very well-made film in intent, and I mean Robert Eggers definitely directed this movie with a certain intention, and I don't think that's why I sort of struggled to say like I think this is a well-directed movie, but I think it's almost to the movie's detriment, because I think that everything is a purposeful choice, but intention, I don't know, like for me, I mean, intention is all well and good, but once it's like out there on the screen, the intention actually doesn't even matter to me, because it's whatever sort of
Absolutely,
like it's whatever anyone wants to interpret it as. And yeah, for some reason, that idea, I guess, figuratively didn't work for me, and I just found it almost like jarring anytime I was hearing Robert Pattinson speak. It's strange how I almost like watching this movie. And speaking on sort of like the silent era, sort of like inspired images of it, I had the feeling the second time around, a really strong feeling that I wished the movie was almost entirely silent, except for when Dafoe was sort of like speaking as Proteus, this sort of like mythic character. And instead of having Pattinson have any dialogue, like literally his performance is entirely silent. And you just like see the dread on his face, and you just get like title cards expressing what he's saying. Because I think like he just, it's not even that I think that his performance is like bad. I think he could pull something like that off really, really well. And I think the movie itself just, it had too much content to fill an hour and 50 minutes with a movie that has the typical dialogue and 3-act structure. Because and what I was going back to what I was saying before about the film being almost like boring, when it's Pattinson outside silently toiling, I find every image like fascinating. Like every image evokes exactly the feeling that he expresses in himself in like the dialogue of like how he basically almost murdered someone, or more or less let someone die in his past.
Right.
The images express it in every single one of those shots. And I do love the sequences. Like I love, like when he's hanging off of the lighthouse, like painting the lighthouse, and he falls down, and like Willem Dafoe doesn't even help him up. He's just like laying there, and the seagulls are pecking at him. I
What a
love
sequence.
I have to say, probably the image of this movie that'll stick with me forever is Headlight Dafoe. Just that image of like Willem Dafoe kind of like gripping Robert Pattinson in a very almost like Greek statuesque kind of way, and his like eyeballs are just headlights like shining down on him. Like that is like all of that stuff is so strong, and the dialogue, I think, when Willem Dafoe is speaking like Proteus, this sort of like godlike figure who's almost gaslighting Pattinson, I feel like it would be so powerful to have like Dafoe just have that performance and then just silence, and you just see this like shocked look on like Pattinson's face, and you have title cards saying like his dialogue, like what the hell are you even talking about, and like Dafoe then goes back to a silent movie character where he can no longer speak. Like it's just, it almost feels like this movie needed to be more extreme in the artistic sort of like intent of it. It needed to be deeper in
That's
that
funny.
world. I feel like, and it's not like the dialogue, it's so, like Robert Eggers, I keep saying it wrong, like Robert Eggers' previous film, The Witch, he's so comfortable with historically accurate dialogue that even if I don't understand everything that the characters are saying in The Witch, those characters are so strongly established and the world around them is so rich in palpable history that he can just go forward and understand that we're not going to understand everything, and it's totally fine. And I feel like sometimes the dialogue in this movie is that way, and sometimes to me it's just really distracting, and it just pulls me out of the visual kind of experience of watching the movie. Because I also think the most boring shots of the film are when they're inside, in the dark, by the table, drinking and like having conversations. Like it looks gray and dark and grimy, but uninteresting also in a sense as well. And I know they had like giant lights lighting that set, like because I know that camera they were using is like not good with capturing light at all, so you really have to bump up the exposure level, I think, of what you're lighting.
And I think that is the thing that ultimately is the most interesting thing about those sequences, the lighting of it.
Okay,
I love the lighting and stuff like that. I mean, we were talking about how, this movie was very well received critically. Not that Rotten Tomatoes matters much, but it's got
it was
like 90 something percent on Rotten Tomatoes, and but it's big. It got and people talked about Willem Dafoe as like a potential supporting actor nominee at the Oscars, but it's also weird because he's a co-lead and it's tough to call anybody supporting in that.
Yeah.
But the only Oscar it really got nominated for was cinematography, and I think that that's very earned, especially in the way that you're saying, like those shifts in lighting for that like very like Greek statue scene, and the framing of the stuff out on the island. It's cool. They shot it in Nova Scotia, and they basically, there's like a small like peninsula with a lighthouse on it, or at least with like part of that set on it. And they shot a lot of this peninsula just not, keeping their back to everything, so it just looked like an island. And then they did these like small miniatures to kind of fill it in and make it an island. And I think that was like a really beautifully captured thing. And of the critical reception on that, I think that I just love the cinematography on it. The aspect ratio I think is really special.
The fact that they were able to do this on a $4 million budget is incredible. It's really incredible. No, I mean it almost seems like they built that lighthouse. I don't even know if they found that lighthouse, but it felt built, because it definitely felt like the production design was also very intentional, and I'm sure it was very historically accurate as well. The cinematography is really beautiful, and it's one of those things where it's like I totally understand why this movie has great reviews on Rotten Tomatoes and other review sites, and I think it's a very beautiful film. It's a very artistic and it's a very beautiful film. The problem with me is it's not scary, and it's called a horror film, and I know on IMDb it lists it as a horror, fantasy, drama, mystery. And to me, there's not a single horrific or creepy image. The drama is something that I sometimes disengage with. And the mystery is so vague that I, too, think it's difficult to connect with much of it. The only thing that I really love about the movie, and the only thing that I think the movie does really well, is the fantasy imagery. The mermaids, even the sort of like screaming siren mermaid in the water is something that still give me a little bit of chills when I heard that sound design. Like, it's really well designed, but it didn't really elicit any feeling of horror or dread in me. Like, I feel like the only images that kind of felt that way was in the beginning, when we're almost like getting to the island, and when they're first standing on the island, and Willem Dafoe is just, they look like a picture from like they look like my pictures of my relatives from the 1940s. They're just like standing there with these like grumbly faces, watching the boat like slowly sail away. And that was really the only moment of true dread that I ever felt in the film. And because I just felt like the images were so beautiful and so well crafted, it was difficult for me to find them scary. The seagulls to me are not scary. Like, they're not ominous. They're not scary. They're rats of the sky. They're just annoying. Like, and so like whenever they showed up and when he kills a seagull, I'm like, yeah, fuck that seagull. He was fucking annoying.
Yeah, it's weird because I guess I wasn't thinking of this movie in terms of like, I guess there is a lot of dread. I don't feel a lot of like straight horror from it.
No.
I will say that, especially after all of the genres that you ran through as it was listed, is something that I want to point out, especially in my argument for why I like this movie so much, is that I think this movie is fucking hilarious. I think this is a really funny movie, and I think it's a very intentionally funny movie. It's not like I'm not like laughing at a horror movie that doesn't realize it. Like, I think that playing on like the weird, the generational gap, especially, there's a lot to say about toxic masculinity as, hot button term, but just masculinity in general. Their clearly homoerotic relationship. Like, this is a very, very homoerotic movie that is played for laughs, not at the homoeroticism, but their inability to handle it. Mm-hmm. That it's like a thing that it's like if they just admit it as like an undeniable aspect of two men alone for 2 months, it would just make it easier. But they can't admit it, and they're just like secretly masturbating around each other, and it's just like, and that I think that to play on the comedy and the absurdity of the way that men handle that is a thing I think is very funny. It's why I think the opening 20 minutes of The Master are so funny. Just like the weird repressed lives of those guys on that Navy ship, I think is just like it's so uncomfortable that I find it very, very funny.
It's interesting how
No, please go ahead.
I was just going to say, because it's interesting how I didn't, in my first viewing, I actually didn't look at reviews, and I didn't look at people's reaction to it, and I never had the feeling of homoeroticism. I actually I never thought it was anything about that, and I only before the second viewing, when I Wikipedia'd this movie and sort of like did kind of like tertiary research into some of the background of it, did I find out that kind of the reaction was like, oh yeah, this is a film that is very similar to what you're saying. Yeah, it was like, and I think there's definitely there must be an element to it that I'm not finding funny, but there is a very large group of people that read into this homoeroticism in the film and sort of the ideas of toxic masculinity. If this movie is, when I looked at this movie, and sort of like this movie in relation to a lot of different movies, there's the question of like, is what we're watching real? And in my head, if what we're watching is real, then this is a movie about two men that go crazy because they're both obsessed with a warm jerk-off space. And that's literally, that when I watched the movie, that was literally my entire reading of the film, was like, oh, that light is just like really warm, and they just wanted to go up there and like get naked and like masturbate a bunch, and that's all this was about. It was just Robert Pattinson was really pissed off that Willem Dafoe won't let him use his warm jerk-off space.
And I think that there is a valid conversation to be had around that based on the behavior of a lot of people I know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I think that there is and I think, obviously the most on the nose on the nose exemplar of that in the movie is the sequence where they are drunk, they almost kiss, and decide instead to have a fist fight. It's just like that's a very, very on the nose thing, but I think that it's like letting that happen at one moment in the movie, I think, can really underline everything that's happening on either side of it.
That's the
and
one.
I just think that it's a thing that's, yeah.
No, I was just going to say that's the one moment of homoeroticism that I read into. That's the only one that I ever pick up on. And then the rest of the movie, I don't know. I don't know if I'm just not engaging with the story in that way. But it's interesting that you find it, so funny. Because I wonder why I guess it is kind of in the subtext that it's funny, though. So that's why you can't really qualify this movie as a comedy, because it's not really...
Right.
It's going for the drama and the horror. Or not the horror, but it seems like it's going for more the drama fantasy aspect of it. Maybe not the horror.
Fantasy I think psychological is more it's the adjective that whatever genre you apply it to is the important part. That it's just about two dudes who just can't keep their shit together for a lot of reasons, and then are put into this potboiler situation, and they just kind of lose it.
Yeah, I might have been inappropriately assuming, maybe going into it, that it was I was inappropriately expecting a horror movie, because The Witch, his previous film, the images are so scary, and there's even an image in The Lighthouse that harkens back to an image from The Witch that really sticks with me as just a very haunting image. And it's the very last image in The Lighthouse of Robert Pattinson on the coastline, and it's very much inspired by the story of Prometheus. And I'm not going to go into the story of Prometheus, but his punishment by the gods of Greek mythology is to sort of he has his intestines pecked out, I think, by an eagle every night, and then every night it grows back, and it happens to him over and over again until he's freed by Hercules. But it's...
Well, and I would say the only other important part of that is that his punishment for bringing fire or knowledge to humanity, which, the lighthouse and its lamp can certainly be akin to that imagery. So, it's kind of tying a lot of things together.
Oh, literally until that very moment, I had no idea what that was supposed to be implying. Robert Pattinson, reaching into the light. Okay. Well, at least I don't...
and that's... As a mythology nut, I've some of my favorite stuff are kind of the allegories for consciousness. That we, kind of we are a different. We are considered kind of like maybe a different level of animal almost, because we have our awareness. We know that we are a person. We know that we will die. That level of consciousness and our knowledge of our own mortality, that ultimate knowledge, that is kind of shown in Eve eating the apple, or from the tree of knowledge, she's gaining consciousness, or Prometheus giving us fire, which was the first technology ever. So that's a symbol for knowledge. And I don't know,
right.
I love those sorts of the humans gaining consciousness myth.
No, thank you for that, because I always saw that final image as very Lynchian in almost its vagueness, because I really had no interpretation of why, when he reaches into the light, does it make him scream in horror. But that makes a lot of sense. But going back to what I was saying, and I guess... sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. But I was going to go back to just the image itself.
To finish on
Continue.
To finish on the thing that I was saying also is that an ending like that, the ending that I would compare that to in another movie would be the ending of Pi, Darren Aronofsky's first film. Have you seen that?
I have not seen that. Still, have not.
Oh, well, then never mind.
Okay, but
I'll cut that out or something.
Sorry, Clyde. But yeah, so there's a lot of mythology steeped in the image of Robert Pattinson sort of getting pecked out, slowly dying on the beach. His eye is almost exposed, and his guts are exposed, and seagulls are doing it instead of eagles this time. But it's interesting how, once again, it just reminds me of a filmmaker's intent, and how even that sometimes can't, even with all that subtext in there, I think the more fascinating and haunting image Robert Eggers was able to create is the image of the crow pecking out the mother's breasts in The Witch, which is
I actually hadn't connected those two images, but that's a very good point.
Yeah, but I feel like that image itself, I don't know if it's even connected really to any other mythological characters other than the characters he's sort of making up in the story of The Witch itself, but that image is horribly haunting to me and is just one of the most powerful things I've ever honestly seen in cinema. And I had literally zero feeling when I saw Robert Pattinson being pecked out by seagulls. I was just confused by why he fell down the lighthouse, which now I sort of have less confusion, so maybe I should watch it again. But I was just confused after the lighthouse scene, and then I just saw him out there on the beach, and I didn't feel sorry for him. I didn't feel like what I was watching was horrific or gross. Like, it was so comfortable to, like, watch that image that it sort of just left me with a very kind of just bad feeling towards the film because, yeah, once again, maybe I was expecting something closer to The Witch, which was, like, even the environment and the setting of The Witch is so creepy. The woods are creepy. The house and the way it creaks is horrifying. Like, everything about that movie is steeped in, like, dread and horror, and I think I just probably really sort of wanted that, and I don't know if I kind of engaged with this sort of like slower, almost like homoerotic, like deep in kind of like mythos imagery stuff as much. Like I wanted more content in the film, I guess, or just something else. Maybe just more experimentation, like with making it a silent movie or something like that.
And I think that also when you're comparing The Witch and the Lighthouse, especially in the sense where the Lighthouse, because of its black and white tone and it almost looking like this like old silent era, you know, the box aspect ratio and everything, that it almost feels a hint more stagey in a way that I enjoy. Like I enjoy that it's kind of so stagey, that it all just feels like so enclosed in that box. But there's something to the very like modern and like digital and almost naturalistic way that The Witch captures that world that makes it feel a lot more real and like tangible in my brain.
True.
The world of The Witch is a place I could be, and that witch could fucking come after me. You know, the world of the Lighthouse is a thing I'm watching in a box.
Yep. We are both New England natives, so that makes sense that we have that.
No,
I
couldn't
so
say I'm
scared.
from New England.
Oh, is Pennsylvania not considered in New England?
No. That would be. I think it's considered Mid-Atlantic.
Oh, okay. Never mind then. All right,
that would
never
be
mind.
an insult to a lot of New Englanders I know. I've spent a lot of my life in New England, though.
But we grew up in sort of like similar kind of like just trees were always surrounding us type of thing, and I felt like The Witch definitely harkened like a fear from my childhood of just like the woods at night and things like that.
Man, the woods are scary, dude.
The woods are scary.
You know, so I feel like we haven't talked much about Dafoe, I guess. You know, the man's a legend.
Well, Dafoe,
we've been saying how good and truly epic he is in this movie.
There are so many great performances. The earliest I can remember, I'll say earliest and like latest performances by Dafoe as like a person in just cinema, but like the earliest performance I remember loving, and it's been years since I've seen it, but I loved Boondock Saints. And on the very opposite end of the spectrum, I love him in Boondock Saints, let me say. I don't love Boondock Saints, but I remember loving him in Boondock Saints.
That's a better point. Yeah.
And
he's good in that movie.
Absolutely love him in a film that is so close to my heart that came out in, I think, 2019. It might be 2018. At Eternity's Gate, where he plays Vincent Van Gogh.
Oh.
That movie is fucking beautiful. It's a movie about an artist, and I think a lot of it is just imagery and not a whole lot of content, but the whole movie is just shot so beautifully because it's sort of like it's shot from his perspective and sort of the way he sees the world, and you don't really get that in the sense of like it's not like you ever see kind of the Van Gogh sort of like, what do you call it, like the Starry Night kind of like painted filter on the image. Like it's not like the film is changing how the world looks to like mimic his painting style, but the way everything is framed feels like a painter is framing it, and a painter is sort of like looking at this landscape while kind of like having
That's a nice
subject.
balance.
It's a beautiful, beautiful film, and he is incredible in that movie. And we don't even need to talk deeper about Boondock Saints, but I remember when I was young, I loved him in that movie.
That's a performance. I have not seen that, what I would maybe be willing to call wretched film in quite some time. But he, I think, is still the thing that probably works in that, heavily, insanely laden homophobic slurs aside. But
yes.
But, oddly enough, for me, I'm pretty sure the thing, I was born in 91.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, honestly, the thing I remember registering Willem Dafoe first in was Spider-Man.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's just like, he just plays this insane Goblin Man, and he just gives such a like legendary performance in that movie. A thing that like the fact that Spider-Man 2 is able to step out of that shadow and deliver with Alfred Molina is one of the many miracles of Spider-Man 2. But
the main miracle being just Sam Raimi.
Yeah, the movie in general. It's a very special movie. But, like that movie came out in like what, 2000? And
around then.
Or no, it probably came out in 2002. The first Spider-Man was probably 2002 because X-Men was 2000. But even then, so I was 11, and then I ended up probably like seeing like Clear and Present Danger and shit on like TNT and everything. But like to me, he was just the Green Goblin, man.
He has, yeah. No, I mean, when that movie came out, I mean, all of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies are insanity, and he fits perfectly in that insane world where like it really shouldn't work. His costume is kind of silly, and you can't even see his mouth or his eyes most of the time because he's just wearing this literal plastic mask that looks like he's a Power Rangers villain. But somehow he just acts right through that costume, and when he's not in the costume, he's like at that same level, and he is just full on like B movie role. And when I say B movie, I mean that is absolutely a term of endearment, but just like high bar B, like over the top, eating the scenery acting. And I just, especially like in the sequence when he's talking to himself in the mirror and he's switching back and forth between Willem Dafoe sort of like the Goblin character, but then sort of like Norman Osborn, the man kind of struggling with it. I think that sequence I laugh the entire time, but I believe it, and because everything else is so insane to like support the insanity that he's just like doing in that moment. He knew exactly what that role needed, and it's perfect.
It's funny. I think you and I were texting about this like last week about those actors, like those character actors that like whatever the movie is, that dude always gets the joke. Like he always knows exactly the tone that the movie calls for. And like I feel like Willem Dafoe always locks in to what the movie calls for. Like Stanley Tucci always knows exactly what the movie is calling for, and like he gets the joke better than anyone else.
Yes.
And I think that Dafoe is absolutely one of those guys. He's just so locked in on tone.
The thing that and there's another performance that this is kind of changing the subject away from locked in on tone, but he has probably one of my favorite lines from my most memorable line from John Carter is just like Virginia, like just like Willem Dafoe misremembering the main character's name.
I've never seen John Carter.
I think it's a lot better of a film than a lot of people give it credit for, but it's definitely a PG space fantasy. Like it's a lot of CGI. So in your words, it's probably a lot of Gleep Glop, but I can kind of
or a lot of Gumbies,
or Gumbies. I'm sorry, it's like Gumbies. But I can get behind the CGI world of John Carter, and I actually find myself enjoying a lot of it. Although it's very like sprawling. Like I feel like I remember it having almost a feeling of having too many endings. So it's definitely not something I consider a perfect film, but I've watched it probably like 2 or 3 times. It was a great airplane view. I think I saw it for the first time ever on an airplane, and I've watched it on like Blu-ray since then.
Great.
It's pretty decent, and he's fun in it. I mean, he definitely is sort of like playing. He's fully CGI in the movie, Willem Dafoe. So you never actually get to see him as an actor or as like a live action, I guess, performance. But yeah, he mispronounces basically. Well, the character describes himself as John Carter of Virginia, basically, and instead of calling him by his name, they just call him Virginia because that's the place he's from, and they have no idea what that is. So they're just like, Virginia! And I just love Willem Dafoe just yelling Virginia. I feel like I quote that movie sometimes.
And I don't know. I also think that Willem Dafoe is a big get for The Lighthouse. I mean,
oh yeah.
Robert Eggers with The Witch, he had, he got 2 super game like Scottish, Rafe Ingram and Kate Dickie, Kate Dickie is the mom in The Witch. Like, that actress is game for absolutely anything. She has like no ego. Clearly, she's played some of the most like awful people. She's wonderful. Kate Dickie is absolutely great. But they are character actors who like most people would not know Kate Dickie by name. I just watched Game of Thrones and have seen love Prometheus and like the weird shit that she shows up in, and but like, and then that's also a movie that kind of like made Anya Taylor-Joy's career. Like, that was the thing that really kind of primed her as like this big deal that she is now. So the difference of kind of working with some character actors and launching a young girl's career to then go to his second movie where he's working with like Willem Dafoe, one of the greatest character actors of all time, and Robert Pattinson, who is like, whether you like him or not, is one of like the biggest like constantly working actors of this generation right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a huge step up, and I think that to then also have it be a much artier and weirder and intentionally kind of like droningly off-putting, it's a ballsy move.
No, it was a swing. It definitely, and I mean, that's why I sort of don't, I can definitely understand people's enjoyment of it and the great reviews that this movie has, because there is something to kind of behold with the artistry, like going back to just the cinematography and the music, that is in a way also the directing. Like, the directing is kind of like, what would you say, inspiring the direction of both of those things, like all the departments he's working with. But I definitely feel like this movie, once again, is a very well directed film, and both performances in it are doing exactly what the movie is calling for. And so I just sort of enjoyed the visuals. I get immersed in the world, and I wish the content of the screenplay was different, despite the fact that I wouldn't really say it's a bad screenplay, but it definitely is hard to engage with and hard to kind of like find entertaining or really like stimulating at like every moment with its visuals. Like it's sort of, it was a difficult one for me.
It can be alienating.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, both of those actors, I mean, they give pretty wild performances, and yeah, Willem Dafoe, his career is unquestionable in my mind. Like, he is definitely he's a guy who pops up in so many things. Like, I remember he's in John Wick. He was in Murder on the Orient Express. He was the voice of one of the fish in Finding Nemo. Like, he's everywhere, and he always just comes in, does a great performance, and just like knocks it out of the park. I still need to see Florida Project.
He's in John Wick?
He's in John Wick, isn't he? He's like a friend. He plays Marcus, I think. He plays like one of the friends of John Wick, and unfortunately, the much missed Michael Nyqvist plays the villain in John Wick, and he kills. He like shoots Willem Dafoe like a bunch of times. On the
right.
stairs.
So he's only in the first one.
Yeah, he's only in the first one. He dies in the first one. But I love him.
Right.
I love him as that friend. He's amazing, and he's not in that movie very long at all. John Wick is definitely my favorite of the Wicks.
Man, he fucking works.
He works. He's like his talent is undeniable. Like, I guess some people could dislike Pattinson, and I personally don't. But I guess like I understand people hating the Twilight films, but like I don't think Dafoe has sort of like a hated project quite like that. Like, it's all great stuff.
No, I mean, there's plenty of like, he's been in movies that people make fun of, a la you know, Boondock Saints or
Yeah, that's, I mean, I
Triple
guess
X
you're
State
right.
of the Union or Once Upon a Time in Mexico or shit, what was the other one I was
Aquaman.
Speed 2. Like
Oh
he's
my
in
God,
movies that
he's
people
in
make fun of,
Speed.
yet he's the
in
villain
Speed
of it.
2.
And
He's in
but
Speed too.
he still comes out unscathed. He still comes
Yeah.
out unscathed. Like he always looks good. He is never the problem with the thing.
That's true. That's true. But that's what I guess I mean by like his, like there's just so much good sprinkled in there that I just forget about anything that's like bad. I completely forgot about Speed 2 Cruise Control, that movie. Oh God. So
Okay, well then let's look away from Willem Dafoe's filmography,
yes.
because we have kind of had the idea with this podcast that we want to try to make a never-ending chain of the Kevin Bacon game.
Yes.
This
is
it's
a
a challenge
segment.
that we're taking on ourselves, so everyone else doesn't have to. You know, we are heroes.
I'm very
And
scared of
just
this one.
truly chronicling how wildly connected all actors are. And so our idea is that we, in our first episode of the show, which this is, we are going to connect two actors to Mr. Kevin Bacon. And then as we move forward, we're going to have to connect actors from whatever movie we cover back to the previous movie that we had covered, is the idea. And we're going to be kind of trying to challenge each other. And it kind of works because with this first movie, there's kind of only two actors. I kind of want Defoe because I might have figured something out in my head on Pattinson, and I don't want to have cheated.
I think you should do Defoe then, because I don't have either. So, do you want to start us off and see if we can play the Kevin Bacon game with Kevin Bacon and Willem Dafoe?
Yeah, so, you know, for anybody who doesn't know, the Kevin Bacon game is the idea that Kevin Bacon is connected to every actor in the world through no more than 6 jumps. We had discussed trying to put together a point system on if you can get less and less jumps, but maybe I'll just remember, you know, what number we each find. So the idea, I guess, would be to connect Willem Dafoe to Kevin Bacon.
I'll keep count for you, and I guess you can keep count for me.
So, okay. And so when I think of, you know, they've both had some franchise and genre work. When I think of Kevin Bacon, I know he's been in X-Men First Class, which has a lot of shared people. I know there's also Flatliners that has a lot of co-people. I'm going Willem Dafoe to... Okay, I think I can do it in 2.
Jeez.
Willem Dafoe, Willem Dafoe is in the Spider-Man movies with Kirsten Dunst, who is in Melancholia with Kiefer Sutherland, who's in Flatliners with Kevin Bacon.
There you go.
So there's only 2 people between them.
Jesus. Well, that was fast. All right, well, now we're going to begin and I'm going to do full disclosure. I'm going to close this after I just look over a bunch of Kevin Bacon movies. I'm just kind of like scrolling through these fuckers because I'm just like, I have no idea where to even begin with this guy in terms of his, like, what movie to start with.
Okay, yeah, so
But
you would
know
be
what?
connecting Robert Pattinson to...
I'm connecting Robert Pattinson, and I'm just going to go with X-Men First Class because it's the only one that I can think of for Kevin Bacon other than Hollow Man, and I cannot do it for Hollow Man. So Kevin Bacon was in X-Men First Class with, or maybe I should take a minute to think about this for a sec. Hold on, let me take a minute.
You can work through what you're thinking out loud.
I've never been good at this game, so like literally it's almost as if I cannot take 2 different names in 2 different movies and like connect a line. Like I almost just have to start charging forward, so maybe I'll just start charging forward. So
Yeah.
Kevin Bacon was in X-Men First Class with Jennifer Lawrence. Jennifer Lawrence was in Silver Linings Playbook with Bradley Cooper.
Okay.
Bradley Cooper was in... I have no idea. Bradley Cooper was in Wedding Crashers with Vince Vaughn. Fuck me.
Yeah, you're going down a rabbit hole.
Vince Vaughn was in Swingers with Jon Favreau. Jon Favreau was in Iron Man with Robert Downey Jr. I keep getting back to Marvel.
No, that's a bad move.
I'm never gonna. Okay, hold. I see. This is.
Ooh,
why
no,
this-
wait. I could.
Okay.
Wait, so wait, how'd you get to
I'm
Robert
on
Downey
Robert
Jr.?
Downey Jr. in Iron Man with Jon Favreau. So Robert Downey Jr. was.
I can
in
get
Iron
you
Man.
to. I can get you to Robert. I can get you to Robert Pattinson in one person.
Holy fuck! I was trying to go to Willem Dafoe this whole time. Okay, so Robert Downey Jr. to Robert Pattinson.
Jesus. Well, no, then start back at
Hold
Kevin
on.
Bacon, you fool.
Okay, I'll start back at Kevin Bacon. This is terrible. Okay, so this is my round 2 of the Kevin Bacon game because I attempted to just do it
Right.
charging forward, and I was going towards Defoe, but I'm realizing I need to go towards Pattinson. So Kevin Bacon was in X-Men
Right, so-
First Class with Jennifer Lawrence. I have no idea if Jennifer Lawrence was in a movie with Robert Pattinson. I don't think they were. I'm trying to think of like,
I doubt it.
it's just like, oh my gosh. I'm really struggling.
Man,
with
the
this.
separation of the X-Men franchise to the Marvel franchise is tough.
Okay, so maybe I'm going the wrong route with this, with X-Men First Class. Okay, so what other movies do I know Kevin
Okay,
Bacon was in?
I'm also going to be thinking of this now.
Okay, so Kevin Bacon was in Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks. He's in a lot of fucking movies. Tom Hanks.
Sure.
Jesus. He wasn't in a movie with Robert De Niro, was he? Wow. Jeez.
Probably not.
I'm on Jennifer Lawrence. Tom Hanks. How does even Tom Hanks connect with Jennifer Lawrence?
Yeah, I don't know. So how do you get... Man,
Wait a minute. Oh, no, I'm not on Jennifer
Pattinson
Lawrence
is
even
weird.
anymore. I see this game is terrible. Okay, so Kevin Bacon,
You're
who
terrible
was
at this.
in Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks.
also with Ed Harris and Gary Sinise.
Kevin Bacon was in Apollo 13 with Ed Harris. Ed Harris was in Mother with Jennifer Lawrence. Jennifer Lawrence was... Oh, I'm back at Jennifer Lawrence!
Why are you going back to Jennifer Lawrence?
I
you
don't
crazy
know.
person?
I put it... Okay, Ed Harris.
How did you get to Robert Downey Jr.? Jr.?
I went from Vince Vaughn to Jon Favreau to Robert Downey Jr.
Okay.
Kevin Bacon. Here, I'm just going to write this out because I can't even, like...
Kevin Bacon.
I want to put the two names in front of me. So there's Kevin Bacon. There's Robert Pattinson. Robert Pattinson, I'm just going to put movies in between. Was
Yeah,
in
I'll edit
Goblet.
around a lot of this.
Was a Goblet. Jesus. What else was he in other than Goblet? But, like, who else was in Goblet?
That's interesting. Have George Clooney and Kevin Bacon ever been in a movie together?
I don't know if they have been.
Ooh, wait, I can do it with one.
Okay, do it with one because I'm failing incredibly at this game. We'll put it in all.
Kevin
of this, I
Bacon
guess.
is in Frost Nixon. Kevin Bacon is in Frost Nixon with Michael Sheen. And Michael Sheen is in all the fucking Twilight movies.
Damn it! Michael Sheen was the key I should have been looking for the whole time. All right, well, I don't know how much.
That's really funny. That
I
didn't even
struggled.
occur to me.
I struggled really hard to play the Kevin Bacon game now with Kevin Bacon and Robert Pattinson, but that's okay. We found our way there. So Kevin Bacon apparently.
Oh my gosh.
I've never
okay.
seen Frost Nixon, but apparently he was in Frost Nixon with Michael Sheen, and Michael Sheen
Yep.
is the guy from the Twilight movies. The quivering vampire in the Twilight movies.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, well, you'll have to redeem yourself because next week we're going to have to challenge each other to connect somebody to both Defoe and Pattinson. So,
Yeah, and next week, should we come right out and sort of say what next week will be? Sounds like it's going to be a difficult one in terms of actors.
what did we say next week is going to be?
I thought Warcraft was going to be next week.
Oh my God, it is going to be Warcraft.
It's gonna be
Episode 2 is
Warcraft.
going to be Warcraft.
It's going to be a fun.
Yeah,
That's going to be
we're
an
going in the
interesting
other
actors
direction.
game. Yeah.
Yeah, because Travis Fimmel, I mean, he's the most interesting guy in the world.
He is.
That's really funny. Okay, so I love The Lighthouse, and I get why it can be alienating. I really do, and I know that it's like I think it's challenging its audience the way that it's challenging its characters, and I can see that if you're not really there for it, then the challenging part gets really tough pretty quick.
Yeah, but this is definitely one of those movies where, yeah, it's. I would give, if I was to give this movie a grade, I would probably, and I always do it out of 10, I would probably give it a 4 out of 10. But it's a 4 out of 10 that there's a lot of artistry there. It's just that, yeah, as an audience member, I didn't find it very entertaining. And I just always, if you can entertain me, I'll go with you anywhere. And I think it's not just necessarily in sort of like action movies in that sense. Like I can be entertained by Manchester by the Sea. I can be very engaged and entertained by a slow moving sort of like drama. But for some reason, this one, the intention of it was just a little mismatched with what I guess I was probably personally expecting and hoping of it. And it sort of didn't quite match
or
that.
we're really able to even lock into.
Yeah. But I totally get your point of view as well. I definitely understand that.
Well, we want the listeners, because I'm sure we have listeners, to also chime in. Each one of you should pick your take. Hit us up on Twitter, because we're going to have a Twitter.
Yeah, oh my God, there might be listeners to this. I thought we were just conversing. We'll have a Twitter. We'll have a social media apparatuses for you to visit.
Something like that. But we do really, I mean, part of this is because we're kind of opposed on this. We always just want to hear where everyone else is landing. So
I would love to.
Pick your take and let us know. So as we close to the end of episodes, I wonder, hey, Chris.
Yes, Isaac.
What do you love?
Isaac, I had to write down the title to this, but I love the Lunar Injection Kool-Aid Eclipse Conspiracy, which is the newest album by Rob Zombie. I love it so much that I've listened to that.
Can you say that title again?
The Lunar Injection Kool-Aid Eclipse Conspiracy.
Okay.
Which is a follow-up to his previous album, The Electric Warlock, Acid Witch, Satanic Orgy, Celebration Dispenser.
And so, do you love all of Rob Zombie, or is he having a modern resurgence that you're really appreciating?
He is having a modern resurgence that I am really appreciating, that I think I'm kind of, maybe myself and diehard zombie fans are kind of really, really digging into, but I definitely know that like reviews right now, like Kerrang and like Rolling Stone gave him bad reviews, and on Metacritic he's at like a 50%, which is honestly about as high as I ever would want music critics to review a Rob Zombie album, because it's one of those things where kind of, I guess, even, you know, it's funny because I'm bringing this up, but now that I'm saying it, it's almost related to this episode. There's something that relates to the reason why that I love Rob Zombie, that it relates to me loving a film like The Witch. It relates to me loving an artist like Sun Ra is kind of someone that I think of, who's very much like an experimental jazz fusion artist. And that feeling is, whenever I'm listening to a Rob Zombie album, there's a language that he's speaking. There's a language of sort of like love and affection for kind of all of these different influences that he's had from his past, caked into the lyrics and the making of these songs that I'm not always completely understanding the meaning of, but I can understand that someone knows what this all means, and someone is like grasping some sort of meaning to all this noise. Because White Zombie, I mean, if I look through all their EPs and albums of White Zombie, I literally think their entire collection of songs is amazing. The only difference from album to EP is quality of recording. Each one has a very different sort of like studio sound to it, because you just got the sense that like every album they were sort of they were experimenting with the production. And I feel like Rob Zombie, he has a production team and bandmates right now. He was working with John Five and Ginger Fish, who I believe is the drummer, but it's difficult to remember sometimes, and then Piggy D, who's the bassist. And there's also a guy named Chris Harris, and his producer name is Zeus, who's been working with them on the past 3 albums. And I literally feel like these 3 albums are the best work in his discography. I just feel like the band is tight. And I feel like this one in particular is the most listenable of all of them. Like, this is the catchiest of his albums. The last one, though,
It's accessible.
Yeah, it's really accessible. But at the same time, it's literally 10 normal tracks and then 7 interlude tracks, all from a length of like 23 seconds to like 2 minutes. So 7 of the 17 tracks are almost like these short, just kind of like atmospheric interludes to like get you to whatever the next feeling is. And on the last album,
nice.
It was really like the guitar, they found a riff and they would just sort of like hammer out on that riff and just let it sound like a chainsaw. And on this one, it felt like the guitarist, John Five, he was really experimenting with using the guitar as almost just like another just random tonal sound that kind of just comes in, and like every 2 seconds it feels like a song shifts in tone and like shifts in like the style of what it's doing. And it's such a fascinating thing to listen to. And I think he has 2 all-timer tracks on it, and it's the Satanic Rites of Blackula is an all-timer, just an awesome rock-out song. And then 18th Century Cannibals, Excitable, Morlocks, and A One-Way Ticket on the Ghost Train is also an incredible song.
Mercy.
And in terms of his titles, I really do feel that his music is so bonkers and silly that that's his way of mentally engaging his audience, is by giving them these long, complicated titles. So like every track is just like, you have to like think about it to remember what the hell that track is even called.
That's so funny. Yeah, I've always found, I feel like there's a lot of like styles of music that you can like look at certain people and just predict. You're like, oh man, that guy like listens to a lot of Jack Johnson, or like that dude grew up listening to a lot of Fall Out Boy, or like this or that, and you just never fucking know who's really into Rob Zombie. You just never know. It could be anyone. They're everywhere.
I'm really into Rob Zombie. I think he's doing the best work he ever has, and I hope he keeps this line up, and I hope he continues to make stuff, because I'm definitely one of the people who is just digging like every moment of all of his last 3 albums. I just think is like, top of his solo discography. I still kind of look back to the White Zombie stuff. I'm not one of those people, because I really do see like YouTube reviews where it's just like normal people kind of making their reviews of Rob Zombie albums, and every time it's just like, well, it's not better than More Human Than Human, like nothing's ever going to beat like White Zombie when it was like in the 90s and at its perfect time. And it's like, yeah, because that was perfect then, and that will never happen again. And just let something evolve.
And also, why on earth would a person want to be making the same music he was making 30 years ago?
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
I'm a musician, man. I can barely stand to play the songs that I wrote 3 years ago, because I'm always developing my sound.
That makes sense.
I always like my newest shit the most.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
For people to just expect somebody to, well, I mean, it's a shame it doesn't sound like that thing that he made 30 years ago. It's like wishing Arrested Development on your favorite creators. It's like, I don't want you to grow or become anything that could be satisfying for you. Like it's like oddly selfish when people get that in their head.
I agree. But yeah, so I love the Lunar Injection, Kool-Aid Eclipse conspiracy, and I just love all of Rob Zombie. If you listen to one track, if you only have the patience to listen to one track, it's 2 minutes and 15 seconds, even though it sounds like it's a very sort of like upsetting song. I would listen to the Satanic Rites of Blackula, and he's combining the title of 2 films. One is a Christopher Lee film called The Satanic Rites of Dracula, and then Blackula, starring William Marshall, of course, is the other film. And it is just, it opens with, I'll give you this, it like opens with, I love when bands kind of give you a what would you call it, a window into the artistic process. And it opens with Rob Zombie sort of saying like, okay, let's go. And the guitar is already doing a sort of what do you call it when it makes a loud, almost like screeching sound because it's like echoing against
Feedback.
the feedback. Sorry, it has this feedback noise already, and Rob Zombie's just like, okay, let's do it, and the drums start going, and he goes like, whoa, 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 hold it, and he goes more like da 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 da, and the drum just starts doing that, and instantly, the first time I listened to it, I was like, oh, that is better, and then like the guitar comes in. And like the song builds to like
That's
its sort of
so
crescendo,
cool.
and it's an amazing feeling, and it's an all-timer for me. Like Dragula, this is with Satanic Rites of Blackula is like at the same height as Dragula, and I don't want to compare those two, but it's just like that single is, I think of Rob Zombie as
That's great.
so perfect, and it presents his sound so well, and this one he really nails it again, I think. And it's ironic that they're so similarly titled, I'm just realizing now, but yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hey,
If it ain't broke,
shows
no, I'm
that he's
just
never
kidding.
going to change too much.
Yeah. maybe he's actually stayed exactly the same, and that's why I love him.
Yeah.
But so Isaac, what do you love this week?
Oh. You know what, dude? I fucking love Dune. I just finished reading the first Dune book
Ooh,
for the first time in my life. It's
Ooh.
like 800 pages.
my God.
And I'm like 2 chapters into the second one, and I fucking love Dune. Like, it was this, I've always heard it was good, and I'm a big sci-fi guy, and I really, I just always assumed it would be good. And like my brother and I have a good friend, like shout out friend of the pod, TJ, who actually was also eventually the AD on that movie that we first met on that we made 10 years
Yes, it
ago.
was.
And I've always heard it was good. But then I saw the trailer for the upcoming movie, and I love Denis Villeneuve, and I'm really excited that he's getting to make something that scale in the studio system, even if it's getting released on HBO Max, whatever. But like,
Yeah.
but when I saw the trailer, it kind of just looked like, I don't know, like boring prophesied white boy, sort of kind of very, what felt just like early, storytelling, kind of the most basic, almost the way that I think people would describe John Carter, where like John Carter was like one of the first stories of like an earthling who gets zapped to a different planet and gets caught up in a war and has to pick sides, and like all these things that like were repeated ad nauseum over and over and over again.
Right.
And then by the time that they got around to adapting the thing that inspired all of it, that thing is boring now, and that like John Carter feels like a very boring and kind of limited plot structure because it was this like early uber text that kind of inspired so many things. And I guess I kind of just assumed that that's what Dune would be. And fuck, man, that book is incredible. That book is just absolutely amazing. And
That's cool.
It's not afraid to kill off characters. The story develops in like really long and developed ways. It's just and like even the third act even feels rushed. Like I almost feel like the movie should have been or the book should have been an extra 100 pages. Like It is I could just fucking live in it. And yeah, man, I kind of like waited so long, and now I'm finally reading Dune, and I have the first 3 books that are the ones written by the original writer, Frank Herbert. And I fucking love Dune, man.
Cool.
I'm just really, really enjoying the hell out of it.
It is sort of
And
known.
the next 2 books are way shorter.
Oh, okay, cool. So they kind of just probably got all the explanation and all the establishing of everything in that first one. That's what made it so long.
Yeah, and it covers a lot of ground. And then on top of it, like the book itself is actually like over 1,000 pages because there's like 200 and something pages of like fucking appendices.
Oh,
like
damn.
there's just so much information of world building. So, the follow-up books don't need that either because you can just refer to the appendices in the first book.
Gotcha. That's cool.
But yeah, man, fucking love Dune.
I honestly know nothing about Dune as a story. Like I attempted once to watch the David Lynch film and did not enjoy it at all. I don't even think I got more than 30 minutes into it, honestly, and I just sort of, which is not a great thing to do, but I definitely got 30 minutes in and was like, you know what? I'll watch this another time, and just sort of left. And honestly, the most fascinating sort of like adaptation that I've always wanted to see of it is, I think it's like Joe Dorowski's Dune, which is sort of like about this documentary about like a failed cult director's attempt in the 80s to make it. Like it's most famous to me as kind of like this fascinating story that everyone who's read the book seems to have really strong beloved feelings for, but no one really seems to have been able to kind of translate it to any other medium. It just seems like I mean Denis Villeneuve, I believe Denis Villeneuve's upcoming Dune film definitely looks a lot like, you know, more of kind of the same stuff and imagery that I've sort of seen from other depictions of it.
Yeah.
And as much as I do love him, I don't know if I'm super excited for that adaptation. But yeah, that's definitely, there's so many, the list of books that I need to read is endless, but Dune is definitely one of those as well. That sounds like a really great one.
Yeah, I kind of go through phases where I'm like sometimes reading a lot and then sometimes I'm not. Usually if I'm writing more, I'm reading less. And like over the last, like, I don't know, I had a pretty fortunately strong bout of writing coming out of like last year into the new year. And then over like the last like month, I've just been doing a lot of absorbing. I've been doing a lot of reading.
Yeah.
And it's been really nice. It's been awesome.
Yeah, I've been absorbing, but I'm absorbing slowly. The Brothers Karamazov, which is a Dostoevsky novel about family and money and all the terrible things that happen involving those two issues, basically, in like a very like darkly comedic story that takes place in like the 1800s and stuff. But it's very much like a novel.
I like the sound of that.
It's great, but it's an older novel in the sense that sentences are so long that sometimes I forget how sentences began by the time I get to the end of them. Like it's in that very old style of writing where it's like, oh crap, I have to go back to the beginning of the sentence because I got to the end and I don't remember what the fuck I'm even reading about anymore. And it's a very challenging read in the sense that modern books, I think, they don't really make you they don't make you focus on the language as much as the older novels seem to. Like it's like if your head leaves for 2 seconds, you're going to lose everything that's important in what's being told. And I feel like especially with screenplays, and I mean that is kind of my main form and my main sort of like the style of storytelling that I connect with the most is film more than novels. So screenplays are definitely also the medium that I would love to read. And it's definitely like a thing where you can kind of blank out of the experience of reading a screenplay for a sec and still sort of like have that momentum carrying you through what you're sort of absorbing. And not so much with older things. You have to be paying attention. And it's like I really have to read every word carefully to know exactly what the intention of the author is. It's it's a very slow but rewarding kind of like reading experience, but it's going to take me a while to finish this one.
Yeah, well, I mean, got patience, got time, can make it happen.
I got all the time in the world.
I mean, I guess with that being said, I mean, I feel like that does it, right?
That does it. That's about, I mean, I think we've gotten to everything.
I feel like we did it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was the first episode of Pick Your Take. Thanks for listening.
We're on Twitter. I'll drop into the bio specifically what our handle is. I'll get better at announcing it at the end of the episodes once we've kind of locked that in.
I'm gonna have
early
to make
on
a Twitter.
In this, anybody who's willing to review or rate or even subscribe is deeply appreciated. We are just wanting to be here and kind of have some friendly discourse on some movies because it seems like people just get so heated about shit that we might as well kind of be nice about it and still talk about all the different sides. This has been Pick Your Take. My name is Isaac. Thank you again.
My name is Chris. Thank you for spending this lovely time with us.
All right, we will see you next week.